All right, perfect. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Malvina, and I'm the Director of Sales Enablement at ReachDesk. ReachDesk is a direct mail and gifting platform, and I have made the change roughly around 8 months ago to ReachDesk. Prior to that, I was actually at another startup, which was more so in the accountancy space, working with the likes of EY, Deloitte, and PwC. But actually, my entire career and my calling for enablement, whether I found enablement or enablement found me, but that started at Bloomberg, where I actually spent 10 and a half years, so a big chunk of my time. I went through all the possible seller roles before transitioning into enablement. So I'm really happy to be here. Would love to connect with all of you. As you probably know, you can find me on LinkedIn. That is the only social media channel I actually use. So you can find me there, and I'll happily pick up any conversation or any questions that you may have. So for today's brief talk that we have together, I'm going to focus on onboarding and a little bit more also in terms of the considerations that we have to make around onboarding when we start building out a program. How do we know if it's going to be successful? What's going to make it successful, right? And what are all the different considerations that we need to have in mind before we actually start putting things together? I think it's very easy, and I know from experience that when you build out onboarding programs, you think you have everything you need, you roll it out, and then you realize that actually we missed out a lot of things, right? We forgot about certain elements. It's actually not coherent. Things are not sticking together. It's a little bit messy, and the entire experience is not what we imagined it to be. And I think for me, being in enablement and seeing what an important role onboarding plays, making sure that all those processes, that all those little nuances are actually in there is crucial. There was a recent study that was conducted and says that if an employee has a really poor onboarding experience, they are more likely to leave your organization within the first 6 months. That's very scary, right? We give someone a poor onboarding experience, and long and behold, 6 months later, they leave. They go somewhere else. They go to a company that maybe offers them better growth opportunities, but also a better onboarding program. Because I think for all of us, when we join, we want to have an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to get better, an opportunity to really master the craft. And there's so many different elements that come into play because we're not only thinking about the product, we're also thinking about who are my customers, right? Who do we work with? What do they care about? How do I have a conversation with them? How does my product fit into this? So onboarding is definitely important, and one element that shouldn't be forgotten. But before we start off, I'm going to share my screen. I want to share with you a story. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I think when I think about enablement, the first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, what is the vision? What is the vision for enablement? What is the vision for our company? Where do we want to get to, right? And in every single interview process, the one question that always comes up is, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Well, that's a very similar question we have to ask ourselves in the organization where we work. What is our vision? What is the vision for enablement? What is the vision for onboarding? And what is the vision for the company? Because it all ties together. So my question to you, and you can write down your responses in the chat. If you were climbing Mount Everest, what is your chance of surviving a summit attempt? Is it 10%? Is it 5%? Is it 95%? What do you think is your chance of climbing Mount Everest and surviving? 5%. Anyone else? 95. Okay. Anyone else? Somewhere in the middle? 0, 1, 0.5. Okay, cool. So I think across the board, we think actually the chance of surviving a summit attempt are really low. 1%, 0%. So I'm going to break a fact to you. It's actually around 95%. That is your chance of surviving a summit attempt to Mount Everest. It's quite high, right? But we can't really do it alone. Does anyone know who this is? Or what this person would be called? Yes, it's a Sherpa. Porter. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so these are Sherpas. Okay, now Sherpas, it's not a job description. Okay, they're actually an ethnic minority that live around the area where Mount Everest is. And their sole role is to help, right? To help you summit Mount Everest. And ultimately, you can't summit Everest without the help of a Sherpa. It's impossible, right? Why is it impossible? Because they know the summit so well. They know how to navigate it. They know how to act in an avalanche, right? What happens if there's ice fall? What happens if there's extreme altitude? They know how to negotiate these very difficult conditions, what to do when the temperature is minus 50 degrees. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do if the temperature is minus 50 degrees, right? But because they live in that area, because they have spent so much time there, they are so skilled in knowing how to navigate these really, really difficult conditions. And ultimately, for every single person that is attempting a summit attempt, you need to have a Sherpa by your side. It's very interesting if you look at pictures of people wanting to summit Mount Everest or attempting to summit Mount Everest, you actually won't see the Sherpa in a selfie. Okay? Sherpas never appear in selfies. It's always the person who's climbing. They are just there in the background. Okay? The interesting thing with Sherpas is that it's never about them, right? It's always about the person that's trying to climb Mount Everest. It's always about that person who wants to get to the top. They are just there assisting and helping. But ultimately, the show is about you. It's never about them. Okay? And they serve. And what I mean by that is during the day, they might help you summit Mount Everest. They're going to push your bags up, make sure you make the right step so that your foot doesn't trip. If there's something in the way, they will clear it. They are going to help you get to the top. But when you get to the top, or even before you attempt your journey, they are the people that are going to make you that cup of hot chocolate or cocoa, or make you a piece of toast and give you something to eat. A lot of people say it's almost like spending a day with Michael Jordan, right? Like, here is this amazing person that can do so many great things, but then they serve you. They make you food, they give you a warm drink, and it's always about you. It's never about them. Okay? The whole purpose of a Sherpa is to help you get to that end destination. Okay? To help you get to that end destination. And in this example, it's all about summiting Mount Everest. And this is the way that I see enablement. I see enablement as that Sherpa for salespeople, for the sales organization, for the go-to-market team, for the commercial team, however you may call it within your organizations. I see enablement as a Sherpa. It's not about me, okay? I am there in the background helping and assisting as much as I can, making sure that everyone has, the right resources, the right tools. But ultimately, it's about them. It's about the sellers. I get so excited and happy when I see that a salesperson has closed a deal, or that when we won a customer over that actually we weren't able to for a very long time. I celebrate those successes with the team, but it's never about enablement. I'm there in the background, a little bit like that Sherpa, just making sure that everyone has everything that they need. Right? Metaphorically speaking, do they have that cup of coffee? Do they have that tea? Do they have the right toolkit? Do they have the right content and resources in their backpack? And that's a little bit of how I see enablement. And ultimately for me, enablement empowers the sellers to get to the top of that Mount Everest. And that Mount Everest for all of you here today, could be very different, right? Targets could be different. What you're trying to achieve at the end of the year could be very different. Maybe you're going through a funding round and you want to get funding, right? Maybe you have really high targets, which is what I'm hearing a lot happening now. You have really high targets that you need to achieve. And enablement ultimately empowers you to get there. If I think about enablement, and I know that onboarding is such a big piece, but it's just a small piece of the puzzle. And the way that I look at enablement is actually through these pillars. Okay, so it's an enablement solution. It's marketing content, right? We talk so much about sales and marketing alignment. Plays a huge part in onboarding, but how do we make it better? How do we ensure that marketing is actually producing the content that we need? And finally, from enablement's point of view, how do I know that the sales team or the commercial team is using the content that marketing is producing in the best way possible? I always say, and marketing always says, they produce so much great content, no one uses it. They use old things that maybe they created, 2 years ago. No one's using any of the stuff that they've created. And what I say, it's never about the content. It doesn't matter how good the content is if your sales force or your organization isn't trained on it. Because you can have the best piece of collateral, but if you're not bringing it up in the right conversations at the right time, it's just going to fall flat, right? The next piece is internal training. What is the training that we're giving our commercial team to really set them up for success? And onboarding, which is the next pillar for me, is just the foundation, right? Onboarding is not something that only runs for three weeks, 1 month, 3 months, and then it's finished. It's actually an ongoing process, right? You want to set someone up for success, but you need all of these pillars here in order to be able to do that. And then finally, the last one is sales process. And this is one where if it's not done right, things can get very messy very quickly. We need to define what the sales process is, what the methodology is, what is our way of selling, how are we positioning ourselves to the customer? Because if we don't have a sales process, well, then I don't have onboarding content. Right? I have nothing to teach these new joiners that are coming to the organization. So it's often very easy to look at onboarding in silos, but it's actually a combination of all of these pillars that feed into onboarding. So what are the key areas of focus when it comes to onboarding, when it comes to building out a program, when it comes to setting up sellers for success? Number one is global consistency. And onboarding plays a huge part there, right? If we have global consistency, we are able to build really a high-performing sales organization. Without global consistency, you are going to see things done in one way here, another way in Europe, another way in New York. And ultimately, before you know it, onboarding becomes such a challenge because you realize things are done in different ways everywhere. And I'm sure you can relate to that. I've been in situations, even in my existing role, where I realize, well, why is it done like this there? And why are we doing it like this here? And how are we going to teach this in onboarding? And you might have the best intentions during onboarding, but if there's no follow through afterwards, it's very easy for this to fall flat. So global consistency to build that high-performing sales organization. Onboarding, huge area of focus for any kind of organization because it sets the right foundations for success. But again, if you think back to that previous slide, it's a combination of all these different things that we have to think about. Repeatable process. I love this word. My husband uses it all the time. Growth machine. What do we mean by growth machine, right? Every single company, every single organization wants to grow, right? Especially in the startup space, there's the valley of death. I don't know how many of you have heard of the valley of death, but it's basically your chance of surviving as a startup. And the chances are really, really small because at every single stage, you have to reinvent yourself. You have to adapt your processes. You have to ensure you're aligned. You're going to have to make changes that are probably very uncomfortable, right? So how do we build that growth machine? And we do it by having repeatable processes, which again ties into global consistency and again ties into onboarding. But those processes have to be in place. And then finally, the other key area of focus for me really is content management. And I had a chat with Adriana before about this, that when you're a new starter joining an organization, it is so difficult for a lot of people to know, where are things stored? I want to access the pitch deck. Where is it? I want to see a proposal that we've put together for a customer. Where is it? Right? And I've seen it, and I've been in situations like this where I join and I'm like, okay, where is all the stuff? And someone will tell me, well, it's in G Drive. Which G Drive? Where am I looking? And you almost fall into this trap of, unless someone shares with you a piece of content, you are never going to find it, right? So you want to make things as discoverable as possible, because otherwise we are going to spend so much time just looking, is this the right version of the document? Because Sally over here has created her own version of the same document. Which one is it? Which one should I be using? And ultimately that content management piece, one around discoverability, but it also ties into this entire concept of marketing and sales alignment. How do we track what's working and what's not working? One of the areas of focus for me right now is our marketing team at ReachDesk has put together a lot of incredible content. Okay, new pitch decks, brand new brochures, brand new customer case studies, brand new testimonials. I'm very lucky in the sense that all of our customer meetings are actually recorded in a tool called gong.io. And I did spend the last few days going through all of our customer calls and seeing what is the content that our sales team is using. Now, if you have a good onboarding program, or at least the solid foundations of it, I know that all the people that joined in the last 6 months, they are using the right things because I've trained them on it. But the challenge is with people who have been in the organization for a lot longer, right? Because they fall into what they're comfortable. They're comfortable using the old stuff. They don't want to see the new stuff, and that's what they're going to be using. And ultimately, that poses a lot of challenges because if you're going through things like rebranding, you don't want your sellers using old content. So again, another big piece of the onboarding game. If we think about those pillars now, let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into each one of them. So the first one is a predictable sales training program. I always say onboarding doesn't finish after 3 months. You have to do something afterwards, right? It doesn't have to be as intensive as onboarding is, but you have to be able to support and almost spot check that what you have covered in onboarding sticks. I see this all the time. We put all this great content in the first 2 weeks when someone joins. By the time they get to week 5, they forget 75% of what they have learned. That is very scary. It's very scary for me. It's very scary for all enablement professionals because we realize that actually by giving them more in the early days, it actually doesn't set them up for success. It means that I'm going to have to redo my job. Right? So how do we break that knowledge into smaller chunks? How do we make it so it's more easily digestible? As I said, sales process plays a huge part in how you build out your materials. You want to define what that sales process looks like. You want to align it with your buyer journey. What does that buyer journey look like? And finally, you want to define really what is the sales process and methodology that you use, because as well, that determines how you're going to be onboarding your sales team. Are there any question for the group here? Do you use any methodology currently within your organizations? And if so, can you just jot down what you use in the chat? Does anyone use Medic or Spiced or any other methodology? Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I believe that maybe we're not using those yet. So,
all right. Okay, cool. So I'll carry on. Maybe you have a name for it, maybe you don't. But even if you think I don't have a methodology, you do. Maybe it's not a name that I've mentioned, but there is a process that you probably follow. The second thing is having really clearly defined entry and exit criteria. We all know what the sales process looks like. You all have a sales process built in within your organizations. But what does a seller have to do to get from the first stage to the second stage to the third stage? This oftentimes is what is missed, but it adds huge value when you clearly mark out what is the entry and exit criteria at each stage. And then you're able to do a conversion analysis, right? Do we lose deals very early on in the sales process, or do we lose all of our deals by the time we get to a proposal? Why is this important? Because then it allows me to understand what content I need to put in the onboarding. If I know that 50% of all of my sellers are losing deals after the first meeting, I want to understand why. And I want to make sure that whoever joins, whatever new seller we're bringing on board, I'm able to change that very early on and address the things so that they don't fall into the same gaps, right? So that they don't fall into the same traps. And then finally, it's that training curriculum. I am a big proponent of certifications. I'm a big proponent of having certifications within onboarding. At ReachDesk, what we do when we hire a brand new account executive, within the first, I would say in week 3, they start a running the full sales cycle certification where we take them through the entire buyer journey. Obviously, it's done via role plays, not everyone's favorite thing, right? Some people hear role plays and it's their worst nightmare. But what we have found is it allows us very quickly to course correct, right? If maybe they haven't learned something isn't sticking, something isn't making sense, we are able to course correct immediately. And then they feel ready to have that real customer conversation. So we have all the collateral, we have content available for them to consume asynchronously so that they can watch a video, for example. But once they have done a given portion of that material, we take them through this running the full sales cycle certification where we are able to course correct things. And ultimately, for onboarding as well, I say, we need to focus on the buyer journey. That is what's going to make us successful. What does that buyer journey look like for our customers? How do they make a decision? What are the considerations? How long typically do we see them sitting at each stage in the sales process? Right? And then on the basis of that, again, that all ties into when you build out your onboarding program and when you build out your certifications. We've recently had a new account executive join, and seeing the pressures of working in a startup or a scale up, you want to be able to decrease the ramp time, right? When I joined, my first ask was, Malvina, we have to get people selling faster, right? We can't wait 5 months for them to close their first deal. We need to have it happen a lot earlier. So me, having come in, I'm thinking, well, what can we do? Obviously, we've introduced the certification process as part of onboarding. But I think the greatest kind of success for us was something that we've seen 2 weeks ago when we've had a new account executive join, and they were able to complete their entire certification by the end of week 2. 2 weeks in, that's very fast. Yes, it required a lot of time commitment. Yes, there was a lot of self-learning. And yes, I was pushing them, make sure we're booking these certification milestones and calls in, but they smashed it. They are now in week 4, and they are about to close their first deal. That is huge. But again, is it added pressure? Potentially, right? But I feel we have done him justice. We've set him up for success. And I think it's easy to think onboarding is just enablement's problem, right? Enablement worries about it. The truth is that it's enablement, but it's also the candidate, right? It's also that new employee. It's also that new seller. We have to work together. And that is the first thing that I say. You're onboarding. I'm gonna be that Sherpa for you, right? I'm gonna help you get to the top of Mount Everest, but it's also going to require work from your side. And I am also a proponent of not spoon feeding everything, right? I think in today's society, we fall into this trap. We have to spoon feed. Every single piece of information, every single piece of content, we have to give it to them. And what I try to do is set everything up in such a way that it's easily discoverable, right? Just like we spoke about content, G Drive, making things easy to find, everything in onboarding has to be the same. Because I might not be able to give you the spoon with what you need to know, but I know that if you take 3 minutes of your time, you're going to find it. And you're going to have everything you need in a central place. I think there was a question in the chat. We can get to it later. So G Drive is a trap that people fall into. I'm not sure if I'm able to name drop tools that we use, but internally for building out content, making internal content easily discoverable, I personally really like Notion.io. That is the internal tool that we use. Something different, obviously, for the external piece, but we'll talk about that in a second. When I asked you what methodology or what framework you used, I wanted to show you this slide, right? When we look at the buyer journey and when we look at the sales process, qualification is all about understanding the customer. Discovery is about learning and educating. And evaluation is really answering the why for the client. Based on every single stage, right, in the sales process, we want to be able to map out what that entry and exit criteria looks like. Why? Because also during onboarding, in the first, for example, week, I'm not going to focus on evaluation. They're going to get to that a little bit later. I'm going to focus on making sure that they're able to ace that first part of the sales process. And for that, I need to clearly understand, what am I asking my sellers to do? What am I asking my sellers to understand? So onboarding, which is ultimately the right foundations of success, right? And as I said, it never ends after 3 weeks. It never ends after 3 months. It's an ongoing process, but you're setting them up for success. Now, hybrid onboarding. I can't imagine doing in-person onboarding anymore. Like, for me, that concept has disappeared when COVID started. I can't believe that we used to do it that way before, right? When I joined Bloomberg back in 2009, we went through a 3-month onboarding program in person, in a classroom, every day, 8 to 6. That's a lot of time, right? 3 months is a lot of time to spend in a classroom. So now this entire concept of hybrid onboarding, if you're giving your sellers or your commercial team onboarding remotely, imagine it's a video that you recorded and you want every single new starter to watch that video. How do you know that they actually understood what they watched, right? Not every single person consumes information in the same way. Some people learn better when they're practicing. Other people learn better when maybe they have that one-on-one time and they're watching that video. Others love when it's quizzes and it's a little bit more interactive. And I think with hybrid onboarding, that's the first consideration you have to make. Not everyone is the same, and not everyone is going to watch an hour video and then remember everything. So how are we able to cater onboarding and hybrid onboarding to all different types of personalities and different ways in which people learn? One of the things that I try to do is, yes, make it interactive, right? Yes, I'll include a quiz. Yes, I'll do a knowledge check at a midway point. But also, I will try to break up that video. If it's something, for example, 45 minutes long, I will break it down into smaller chunks. And when I say small, I mean 5 minutes, right? So it's almost that on-demand learning. I know from experience, if I give someone 45 minutes, one video that is 45 minutes to watch, they probably won't finish it. And if they do, they won't remember what I want them to remember from it. So how do we make it almost on-demand learning? How do we make it in small chunks so that, hey, even if I have 10 minutes in the day, I can go back to that video, right? Or even if I had my onboarding 3 months ago and I'm like, I remember there was something about this topic. Where do I find it? I don't want to watch an entire Zoom meeting. I just want small little nuggets of information. Less is more. So in terms of hybrid onboarding, I think there's various things you have to focus on. Market, customer, and product knowledge. I say that in that order. Market, customer, and product knowledge. A lot of organizations fall into the trap that they are going to start with product knowledge. You have to know everything about our product. You have to know everything that our product does. You have to know all of its features and all of its benefits, and then we'll worry about the rest. And this is where people fail. Because if you can't understand the market, especially if you're brand new to something, if you can't understand the market, if you don't understand the customers, what their challenges are, it's going to be very difficult for you to do a good job, right? Because it's not the product that sells. It's not the features. No one cares about the features. No one cares what product you're selling. I know when I make purchasing decisions, I don't care what product it is. What I care about is, can it solve the challenges that I have? Can it address my need? Yes? Awesome, I'm interested. No? Then I'm not interested, right? So walking in the customer's shoes, understanding who the different buyer personas are. Who do we sell to? At Reach Desk, actually in the first week, for all of the new joiners, I say, I don't even want you to worry about the product in the first week. We'll worry about the product when we get to the end of week 2. In the first week, and by the end of the first week, I want you to understand who are the customers we work with. What are their challenges? What do they care about? What questions you would ask them, right? Gain that deep buyer persona understanding. Methodology, for us, it's obviously the Reach Desk way. Personas, who are our buyers, our processes, what tools you're using, right? Today, it's not a challenge that we don't have enough tools. It's we have too many tools. How do we use them in the most effective way? And then finally, what is the measure of success? What are our KPIs? What do we care about? You need to know that as a new starter. The next element for onboarding, for me, is definitely gamifications and certifications. There's loads of tools out there that you can use to make onboarding more fun and more interactive. A lot of these tools I also build out in our certification process. Pitch IQs, which I will touch on in the next slide, knowledge checks, demo accreditations, discovery accreditations. How do we ask the right questions? Are we going deep enough, right? Are we understanding the challenges? Do we have a sales certification in place? And then finally, conversational intelligence and coaching. As I said, all of our account executive calls are always recorded in a software. I can always go back, review them. We can review the transcript. We can use for buzzwords. We can do a quick search across all of the conversations that our sellers are having. How many times are our prospects mentioning a specific competitor? Or how many times the objection comes up, budget. I don't have the budget. We don't have the budget, right? I want to know that. I want to know what that landscape looks like, because then it determines what training we're issuing to our sellers. Okay. In terms of gamifying, there's a great tool out there called Kahoot, which I have used multiple times. You can get a free version of it. It allows you to create a very interactive quiz, which you can then share with your sellers. There's another tool out there called Mentimeter, which is really great for creating word clouds, right? Whenever we do a training, or onboarding, my first question is, what do you know about this topic so far? Grab your phone, enter the poll that I just created, and tell me what you already know. And again, you can also use it for gamifying things and making presentations as well more interactive. And then finally, that third piece of onboarding for me is really content management. Right? So all the resources, playbooks, content, and materials easily accessible in one place. And believe me when I say that G Drive is not the answer. You think it's the answer early days when you still don't have a lot of content. And then there comes a point where you realize it's just chaos. There are so many different versions of the same document. No one knows how to find it. Nothing comes up in the search results. There's loads of content management tools out there, similar to an LMS, because they also have the elements of an LMS in there. They can sync with your G Drive. So if your source of truth is the G Drive, because that's where you created the document or the PowerPoint, you can create a live sync with the platform. So if I'm a seller, I can do a keyword search. It's going to scan the text that I have in that document and then surface the information for me. When we've implemented at this organization and also in the previous one, a content management solution, it has been a game changer. I don't have anyone asking me where something is. And if they do, type in the keyword, it's going to come up, right? It not only scans the subject, it also scans all of the text that you have included. And it also has the ability to scan audio, which is awesome. Because if you have a training, right, maybe done via Zoom, you can house that Zoom recording in there. You can make the transcript searchable. So if I type in a keyword, I get surfaced all the right content. That challenge has been solved. Prior to bringing on a solution for that, obviously it was G Drive and constant questions of where things are. And I don't always have the answer. Sometimes I don't know where something is. All right, so here's an example, right? We were talking about content management solutions, making things, really, really discoverable. We talked a little bit about certifications, including them in your onboarding. I took some screenshots for you of what something can look like. So this is a tool that I've used in the past. We can talk about names afterwards. But again, it gives you the ability to put in your certification. You can put in elements in there. The person can submit it, the manager can mark it, or even the enablement individual can mark it. The AE or the seller is able to progress. You don't have to constantly book time on Zoom. You're able to do everything in a hybrid way and just keep those check-in points. This is a pitch IQ. So I love pitch IQs because when I have a new seller joining the team, I ask them to record a brief demo, record your discovery. What questions would you ask? If you were speaking to this particular buyer persona, how would that conversation look like? And yes, it's uncomfortable, but I think it's a little bit more comfortable than a role play because they're doing it in the comfort of their own home, right? Or in an office, wherever you are. They're going to record it. And I, as the enablement individual or potentially the manager, will go in and say, hey, this is what you did great. Here are the areas where we still need to work on and improve. So this is a great tool and concept just to consider if you're doing hybrid onboarding, if not all of your onboarding is done in person. I'm going to skip through this very quickly, but ultimately when we talk about content, right, we talked about G Drive, we talked about the importance of it in onboarding. It's three things really that tie into the current challenges. It's disengaged buyers, right? So sales reps don't have access to the relevant content. It's sales inefficiency. We're not being efficient. We're using poor content, poor performing content without even knowing, right, that it's poor performing. And then finally, it's that third piece around lost market share, right? Buyers want to engage in a modern way. That is the truth of it. I get so impressed whenever I'm in a meeting and I receive a follow-up. All of my resources, everything that I have asked for is surfaced to me. Maybe it's put in a digital portal. It looks nice and neat. We're in 2022, right? Like that's how we want to be communicated with. And I think when we look at the buyers, they expect the same. And then finally, you always need to align marketing and sales on KPIs, right? So you can do MQL to SQL. You can look at marketing influenced revenue. Huge part when we talk about content, right? Is that content actually influencing the revenue? And what's our 1 ratio? All of the content has to always be aligned with the buyer journey, right? Same when we onboard someone, same when we do training, it has to be aligned with that buyer journey. And here's an example of how to easily organize your content and something that I've done in the past. This was done through one particular tool, but there's loads of companies out there that do it, right? Making things easily accessible. What's our customer-facing content? Things that I can share out with customers. I know that I'm okay to share out. Where is all of our internal content locating? Where is all of our marketing content located? Where do I go for pre-sales support? Where do I go, for example, for an SDR portal, right? If you create an experience like this during your onboarding for your new joiners, it means you're not going to be getting all the questions and they are going to be able to find the content themselves. And if we dive deeper into one of those options, I want to easily categorize things, right? What are the blogs? What are the e-guides? What are the case studies? What are all of our marketing videos? Where do I find all of my pitch decks, right? Where do I find all of the information on product marketing? Big challenge in organizations. Product is creating all of these cool features. No one knows about it. Why? Because no one looks at Slack messages. Maybe they read the email, maybe not. How do I do it so that even if they missed my message, they have a central place where they can go and see what's happening? All right, so key takeaways really for us. For me, it was really about creating that magic formula at Reach Desk. We wanted to create the foundations for success when it comes to onboarding and really making sure that that content and tooling is aligned, right? That we have that marketing and sales alignment. And for me, really, when I was creating a lot of the things, when I looked at onboarding, I said there's so much to onboarding that often gets missed. And I didn't want to do that. Ultimately, if you're able to address all of these things, you are en route to achieving global consistency. All right, so we're at the hour. Thank you so much for listening. I would love if you could connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, need advice, or just want me to point you in the right direction, I'm more than happy to do that. I don't always have all the answers. I think enablement is so much of a profession where you're working with the sellers, you're working with marketing, you're working with product. So you might not always have all the answers, but if I can help you guys in any way, please do let me know. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks so much, Marvina, for your presentation. I was wondering if we could just answer one question that popped up quite early, so that I believe it's quite interesting. So Tomasz asked, actually, what is the biggest challenge for new employees according to their first period in company? So from your experience, what do you feel is most challenging for them?
When a new employee joins an organization?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it really depends what was the industry that you've come from, right? Because it's very easy to assume we all been, maybe in SaaS sales is a good example. But if you hire someone who's been in a completely different industry, right? Because a lot of these skills are transferable, but we actually found that it takes them a lot longer to ramp, right? Because they're used to a certain process. They are used to doing things in a certain way. And for us, it's making sure we have the right basics, right? What does our buyer journey look like? What does our sales process look like? What are the customers that we work with? And once that seller is able to grasp the basics very early on, everything else is just small tweaks.